the voice of queer Southern pop.
I know that's right.
The one and only. Way down south. Fancy Hagood.
How's it going?
I don't know why I did that in a Southern accent because you don't have
I don't have one. I'm born in Georgia, was raised in Arkansas, you would think, and I've lived in the South the majority of my entire life, so you would think I'd have some sort of draw. I'm never going to de-Reba myself for anyone ever again. How about that?
Nobody puts Reba in the corner.
Or fancy.
Or fancy.
Or baby.
That's
the reference, because my name will always be there. I get that song sang to me probably 4 or 5 times a day. I'm leaning into it. It's just, I'll just start singing along. You know, I'm not the hooker that Reba's been singing about. I wish I was, but I'm not. And, you know, it's just part of the game. Ironically enough, my name actually came from the Drake song Fancy. What? Oh, you fancy, huh? Yeah. So it's funny that Reba is kind of the one who gets all the credit here when Drake is my namesake.
You know who you look like?
Do not even.
Folks, welcome to this episode of Rooted Recovery Stories. I'm Patrick Custer, your host, and so very excited to be here with my friend, the face of Southern queer Southern pop.
That's right.
The voice of queer Southern pop.
I know that's right.
The one and only. Way down south. Fancy Hagood.
How's it going?
I don't know why I did that in a Southern accent because you don't have one.
I don't have one. I'm born in Georgia, was raised in Arkansas, you would think, and I've lived in the South the majority of my entire life, so you would think I'd have some sort of draw.
Well, and same, but did you do the whole thing where you tried to, you tried to be the antithesis of the people you grew up around?
There's a little bit of that, and then I think also, spending the little bit of time I did in LA trying to like de-Reba myself to fit in out there.
Oh, wait, I have to tell the audience. So, wait, when you say de-Reba, are you saying pull yourself away from the country or pull yourself away from the reference because of your name?
Oh, no. The reference because my name will always be there. I get that song sang to me probably 4 or 5 times a day. And I'm leaning into it. It's just, I'll just start singing along with people at this point. But yeah, no, I think to de-country myself, I always talk about, when I moved to Nashville and was trying to start out in music, I was too queer for Nashville. I moved to LA, I was too Nashville for LA. So I think that's what I mean by that. And yeah, I also want to say I've fully Reba'd myself again. So
I'm glad that's the case.
Yeah, I'm never going to de-Reba myself for anyone ever again. How about that?
Nobody puts Reba in the corner.
Or fancy.
Or fancy.
Or baby.
That's right. Fancy baby. So the story I was going to tell, though, which is, I guess, kind of funny, real quick. Fancy and I met for the first time last year when you were singing at a concert and I was the MC. And I thought I was going to be, witty I told a fancy joke. I associating your name with a song and being, whatever. And I thought it was hilarious. And I got a 20% crowd laugh at it. And then somebody was like, Fancy, go out. He just called you. And so I'm sure you didn't hear it, but it was definitely a bomb.
Well, you're not alone in that because mostly when I'm introduced on stage, that happens. It's just, it is what it is. I named myself Fancy. There's, I'm not the hooker that Reba's been singing about. I wish I was, but I'm not. And, it's just part of the game. Ironically enough, my name actually came from the Drake song Fancy. What? Oh, you fancy, huh? Yeah. So it's funny that Reba is kind of the one who gets all the credit here when Drake is my namesake.
How interesting.
Right.
Also, I don't know, title, maybe not the hooker, fancy. Wow. Not the hooker.
Reba's been singing about.
Okay, we'll cut that out. Wait, I don't really mean that. As a joke. My producer told me this morning, y'all, that I need to relax and stop using. I have these 2 different personalities, Fancy. I might have more than 2, but my friends.
We should talk about that.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it. So there's a name. I'm not going to say it. but my friends and coworkers have for a long time had a name for this persona that I have, which is much more polished and buttoned up, a deeper voice and much more masculine sounding that I drop into. And it's rooted in like the internalized homophobia.
Yeah. Wow.
And
I relate to that, by the way.
do you?
Yes.
As a gay man? How?
Yeah.
On Earth?
It happens.
Growing up in the South? But it clicks in for me involuntarily and for different reasons, whether I feel like pressure for this or for that, or I'm around a bunch of straight men, but it's, I think, funny to everybody who knows me because it's so drastic.
Yeah.
Because when I'm feeling really comfortable, my flamboyance comes out and my shoulders drop.
2 vodka sodas in, and I am just limp wrist. I can't help it. And also that it's totally fine to be both, because you know what? Everyone has this, regardless if they want to talk about it or not. I think it's easier to spot in like a flamboyant male all of a sudden presenting as butch or straight acting or whatever you want to call it. Watch someone answer a phone and you're going to find out everyone has 2 personalities. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Someone's talking to you, they're like all candid, and all of a sudden they're like, hello. I'm like, oh, when did you get so jolly? When did you become like the nicest person in the world? Or it's the opposite.
I was going to say, I've got a couple friends who go the opposite direction, and they're also the friends I don't like to go out to eat with. You know why? They send more than 50% of their food back.
Yeah.
Ours gets spit in.
Exactly. I know this is actually triggering me.
Oh, no. Oh,
not in a real way, but that is one of my biggest pet peeves.
Right?
They could bring me the wrong thing entirely, and I would not say a thing. I would be like, thank you very much. And that might speak to my people pleasingness, but I've never been a server, and that's just not something I'm ever going to do. And I have friends who, and y'all know who you are, who have no qualm sending things back, getting spicy. I don't like it.
Well, I have been a server, and I'm friends with servers, and I've been around a lot. We know what happens in kitchens, or could happen, or also just considering the fact that our servers are human beings.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just can't stand the stuff around that. Anyway, wow. Rabbit trail.
That was a trail.
But it was hella interesting. Bring it back, Patrick. Where are we? This has been a great exercise to loosen me up, y'all. I was way too buttoned up this morning. So before I go to Glad, I want to say this. I know you. I'm getting to know you way more today, and I'm really pumped about doing that. But I like to do my due diligence before I interview someone and do as much research as possible. If you've done podcasts, I listen to as many as I can and read as many articles as possible that will inform me, on asking the better questions and knowing more about your life. And so in all 100% of the interviews that I could find and listen to beforehand, and this is no shade at those interviews, but in all those interviews I could find, every single one of them asked about every single person you've collaborated with, and hinged so much of your interview on those names instead of talking about specifically your work. And today, our focus is going to be more about your life and the things we talk about on this show, like the, trauma, healing, all that. But I want this interview to be different. And so I definitely, I want to stay away from talking about those, even though those connections are, and the work you've done with those people is huge.
Right.
You can go look that up if you want to. It's all over the internet.
Yeah, it's out there.
It's out there. And so,
I do want to speak to that.
Okay.
Because it's something that has come up in my, not only professional life, like you said, all the time. It comes up in my personal life all the time, where people kind of make assumptions about me because I'm close to different people of different success levels. And what a lot of people don't know is I've been friends with these people since I worked at Forever 21. Like I've known a lot of these people for a very, very long time. I've been in Nashville for 16 years. I mean, obviously I didn't know Elton John when I worked at Forever 21. That's not real. And it used to be something I felt insecure about, that people only saw me if I was next to blank, or I'm only worthy in a social situation or a professional situation if I'm close to blank. And what I've actually started to, as I've come into myself as a human and as an artist, as a creator, I'm realizing that this actually is not a compliment. Because I used to think I think people sometimes think those people are pulling out the seat for me, and I sit at that table because I'm a guest. Mm-hmm. And what they don't know is I've been at that table this whole time. My journey's been very, very different than a lot of my friends, because I've been openly queer since I was 19 years old. I've existed in Nashville as an openly gay man since I was 19 years old. So of course my journey in this music industry has been very complicated, very up and down. It's been a roller coaster. I've had some big highs. I've had the lowest of lows. I've been signed and dropped by more people than you could ever imagine. And I keep going. And what I realize is that people see the people at the table I'm sitting at because they're amazing and they've accomplished so much. But what they don't see is that I'm at that table too, and it's not because someone pulled out my chair. I earned my spot there. My peers are my peers because they see me as their equal. They treat me as their equal. These are people I do life with. It's not about the professional aspect of it, the music of it all. We all do the same thing. And of course, you know, I've been fortunate enough to be able to collaborate with people who I consider my best friends. But it's beyond the music. It's beyond Music Row. It's beyond what we all do as a profession. These are my people. That's my tribe. You know, like a lot of those people, it's easy to look at the fame of it all and say, oh, well, he's friends with them because of this. I'm friends with them because at the end of the day, those people have my back, and they've had my back for the last 14, 15 years. And that's what people don't know, is the backstory, the longevity of these relationships. And so it's just kind of like, actually, it's an empowering thing for me. Is it annoying when I'm releasing music and someone wants to ask me about someone else? A little bit. But at the end of the day, I have a Real Housewives tagline, and it's this: you are who your friends are, and my friends are stars. And I believe that because I believe in my friends, and their success doesn't intimidate me. Their success inspires me. And I think that's what keeps us all close. And they've had my back through my tumultuous journey through music and have supported me when a lot of people didn't. They were my friends when I was signed to a record deal. They were my friends when I was checking IDs at a bar shortly after, when I got dropped. These people have been in my life always. So it's actually, for me, a really inspiring thing, because when you can see something happen for your friend who you know so intimately, and you know how hard they work and how they show up for themselves and their art, the potential for it to happen to you is that much greater because you see it. You know what I mean? It feels tangible. You see the reality of someone believing in something and going for it.
Absolutely.
It does look different. You know, I'm a flamboyant, openly queer dude. So it's like I wasn't closeted going into all these meetings with labels and releasing music and management companies and all this stuff. Like, I've been very much myself through the whole process, and that's been complicated. It's still complicated to be queer in Nashville, as you know. Yeah. So
it's very interesting because there's this uprising of the queer artists and the queer community being embraced and used in some great ways. And then also, I mean, I'm sure you can tell the difference. I can as well, because I'm in that. I'm not a singer, but adjacent, right?
Yeah.
And getting pulled into circles or events and things where because it is popular, or what do they call it? Not social, virtue signaling, you know, like, so there's some, not all, but, you know, I think that we're seeing a lot of progress in many areas, but there are some arenas where I think everybody's like, well, we need the diversity crew right? Like, and so then everybody's talking to you, Cody, Brooke, the
Chris,
first names.
Adam,
Yes. Some of my favorite people.
Exactly.
But Joy, and which is great and it's awesome. Especially because I feel like you all, from the outside, I don't know what you would say. I feel like there's a wonderful push for y'all's music right now. But that's what I was saying. I feel like there's like in two different ways that this call to action or call to use y'all, right? Like in a good way. And then also one that's like, because we need to.
Well, listen, it's like when Pride rolls around every year, June, you see all the corporations waving their Pride flags. Everyone's an ally, all this stuff. And then it's like, July rolls around and it's like out the window. And, that can feel performative. And I think there's a lot of stuff in Nashville in regarding queer artists and their inclusion that feels performative. I think all of us as artists know when it's happening.
Yeah.
But it's a hard you have to show up. You know, like you have, because that's sometimes just getting in the door, even if people's, I think what I have to always remind myself is it's always about intention, right? What's the intention here? Is it to include people? Is the intention to make a company or whatever look more inclusive than they are on a day-to-day basis, on a 365 calendar year? Probably in a lot of situations that's the case. But if I can walk through that door and represent myself the way I want to be represented and reach people that maybe I wouldn't have reached before, then it's so worth it. It's so important to just show up and it not be about what their intention is. I just have to constantly think about my intention. And my intention is to show up as my authentic self in whatever room I can show up as, to reach as many people as humanly possible so they know too they can be whatever they want to be. That's my goal.
Yeah.
So when, and you can ask my manager, I'm constantly like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Like, what's the point?
Well, okay.
And then
wait, you're
myself.
saying that from like an imposter syndrome or from I need to remember so that I can be intentional?
No, I'm saying that from I'm standing in a line of 10 artists, me being the only queer one, and they're all getting asked questions about their music and all this other stuff, and I'm getting asked questions about Pride. It's like, it's very clear in that moment the reason I'm there.
Yeah.
And I just have to step outside of that because that's their reason. That's not my reason. My reason is to show up as myself so I can change hearts, I can change minds, I can open eyes, or I can be a mirror and allow someone else, like a kid like me that grew up in Arkansas, who never, Leslie Jordan was one of the first queer people I connected with on screen.
Me too.
Yeah, Beverly Leslie.
Yeah.
And
oh gosh,
I was never petite like that. In my heart, I was. In my heart, I was very small and petite and flamboyant. And he gave me permission to kind of be that and to go there and to accept myself in that arena. And so my intention is, if I'm not changing a heart or changing a mind or allowing someone to see me, I'm wanting to be a mirror for someone and to give permission. I want to be a permission giver for someone to be their full authentic self, whatever that might be. So
I just got some chills as you said that, because it rings true with so much of like in my healing journey, so much of what we want to do on this show, what we believe in is all about. But I have to say that it's evident both in your lyrics of all your music that is your intention, and also in your vocals. And so, the fact that you're intentionally bringing that also into reality when you're singing live isn't that the deal? Like, we're wanting to like, if you're doing your thing, it's more than just the paycheck and the
yeah, it's that whole saying, like, live a life you don't have to vacation from.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, when you love what you're doing and it shows, it can kind of it can change a lot of things about a lot of stuff. And for me, I've spent so much time in my life. I'm 33, and I would say I didn't start fully living as myself until recently.
When you say recently?
Within the last 4 years. And it's kind of like...
Since you came back to Nashville?
Since I came back to Nashville, since... I think even... I would say like I got hit by a tornado in 2020, lost my apartment in a tornado, lost everything.
The one here?
Yeah, in Germantown. And I would say that there's a me before the tornado and there's a me after the tornado. And, you know, I was someone who thought I had lost everything before because I lost a record deal, multiple record deals. I'd lost managers, not to brag, but I've had like 8 different managers in my career.
Wow, who's your favorite?
my current manager.
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah. Good answer.
No, she's my longest lasting manager, and she's my best friend of like the last 13, 14 years, Natalie Osborne. And
you know, we're going to bleep every celebrity name you say.
Is that a celebrity name? My
Close
manager? No, but, you know, it's like, I think there's also in that tornado, there was a version of me that was left behind in that wreckage, and I'm grateful for it. And it's so funny to think of something so devastating and so tragic and to be grateful. I think my therapy journey started shortly after that. Some friends were really kind and got me in this program through Onsite where they put me with a therapist, and I was allowed to like kind of like speed date different therapists to find out who my person was, and that was in 2020.
Did you do their program first, or did they just connect?
I didn't go to the on-site facility.
Oh, they just helped connect you.
They just helped connect me to a therapist, and I got a year's worth of therapy.
Wow.
And it was like the first time I've been in and out of therapy since I was 12. Like a really big Christian push early on in therapy, so I had this like kind of like stigma.
Of course. That makes me want to go back and walk our way back to the tornado.
Let's do it.
Because, oh God. Because I got my own.
Yeah.
How many people I've talked to that said, yeah, I got put in therapy. Who's your first therapist? My pastor. Well, no.
Right. Well,
did they have a license?
Luckily, that was not my story.
Okay.
That wasn't my story. I was very heavily involved in church. I had a lot of youth pastors, all that, but they were not my therapist per se. But I started therapy like pretty early on, and it was all like usually Christian based.
So if I asked you what was the cause of you going to therapy what was the accelerator to?
I think behavioral issues.
Yeah.
Would have been probably why I was doing poorly in school. I never did well in post middle school where things just are like easy. Like going into junior high and high school, I started having issues getting along with people. I didn't fit in. I was kind of like an outsider. And so I started having behavioral issues. And so I think that's kind of why I went to therapy the first time.
Like butting heads, getting disagree, like fights with people, or you just like literally like loner, couldn't make your parents wanted you to have more connection?
I've always, even like in school, like back in the day, like even back when I was like very insecure and shy and quiet, I've always been outspoken. I've always been a Real Housewife. Like that's just straight up who I am.
Even before the Real Housewives started?
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah. I was Vicky Gunvalson before Vicky Gunvalson.
No.
I'm joking. But
what's her thing she says all the time?
Whoop it up.
Whoop it up. Whoop it up. Oh.
Yeah, no, I'm joking, but I have always had like a kind of a confrontational thing. It's always been, I don't actually find myself to be as confrontational now. Back then, up in tornado territory, I was a very confrontational person. I think it's like a protection mechanism. I'm going to get you before you get me. So there was a lot of that. I think that's what kind of started the therapy stuff early on. But I'd be like in and out. And then, of course, when I moved to Nashville and was going to a Christian college.
Which one? Can you say?
Yeah, I spent a very minute amount of time at Trevecca Nazarene University. So I
went to Belmont, so that's why I was like, Psh, no.
No.
For those of you who don't know, Belmont and Trevecca have a long-standing rivalry. Well,
Do they?
Belmont, Trevecca, and Lipscomb, wait, you don't even know?
I didn't know that.
Well, I mean,
I don't know. There's like a rivalry. I don't even think they like play the same. Like, I don't even think they're in like the same.
Is that true? I may have just made something up.
I kind of really I love the idea that they have this like big rivalry. I feel like Belmont's such a bigger school. It'd be so hard.
It is a bigger school. No.
And
so I know that it's Belmont and Lipscomb, and I always remember that, but I always thought there was a third. And in my mind, because it's been so long since I went to college.
Same, actually.
I was thinking there's Trevecca. Maybe it's not. So I don't know.
I also might just not have been in on that tea. I don't know.
I mean, I'm like a fly to honey when it comes to drama. So,
girl, me too. Nothing gets my attention more than two people lowering their voices
and say, or you hear somebody say, "Did you hear?"
Yeah, I'll be like full-fledged conversation over here, and I hear two people get quiet. And I literally am like, can't help it. It is my
That's
bad.
a good. When I need to get somebody's attention, you're not the only person. I feel like we all probably do that.
Yeah. Oh no. There's nothing more. I don't love anything more than I love piping hot tea. Give me the scoop.
I think there's two different types of people. People that agree with you and me, and then people that lie about it.
Right. Yeah. Here's the thing. I think there's people that don't want to participate
right
in the stuff.
Yeah.
But everyone wants to hear about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why talk shows do so well. That's why The Housewives does so well. That's why Gossip Girl.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly. But yeah, I've always been confrontational like that.
Did you ever start rumors about people?
Do I start rumors about people?
No, did you? Not, no.
Oh, I was about to be like, yes.
My
friends and I were having dinner the other night, and they all got really tickled at me because this is a real sentence I said in all seriousness. I was like, there's a theory and a rumor going around that I started. That's how I started the sentence. I was like going to tell someone something, and I realized as I was like starting to say it is like, this is something I have just in my head concocted, and I was going to tell it as like a real thing. I'm telling you, I'm a real housewife. It's just what it is.
Wait, we don't get to know what it is?
No, that would be like.
But do I get to know after the cameras stop rolling?
Yeah.
Okay. So, oh gosh, I need to switch brains. This is the side of my brain that is not focused because you got me on gossip.
Well, we were talking about being confrontational, and I was confrontational.
Yeah.
I've been very confrontational. It was as my coping mechanism, and it was always I'm gonna get you before you get me. And I would say that that lasted throughout all of my like early 20s and like late 20s, like all the career stuff, being signed to labels, being dropped from labels, all this stuff. It was all very, very, when I think about that person who I was then, it was all very tense and like confrontational.
So when you say that, my mind goes immediately to yes, but, because I think with every, as you were saying that, I'm thinking like, what Enneagram is he? Do you know what Enneagram you are?
Yeah.
What is it?
I want to know what you think I am.
Well, as you said that, so there's these two different things, right? Like, is this part a personality trait of yours or a coping mechanism that you are only using, which is no longer, but if it is a major personality trait of yours that you've just harnessed for the good now, I would say maybe you're an 8.
I'm not an 8.
Okay.
I've tested as an 8. I've done this test so many times, but the first time I tested was in Los Angeles. I lived in LA for like 2 years. I still had a place here, so I'd go back and forth. But I tested, and I was going through a crazy trauma. Like the craziest thing that had ever happened to me had happened that week. A roommate of mine had passed away. And someone was asking me what I was on the Enneagram. I had never heard about that. And so they tested me, and I was an 8. But then another friend, like a couple years later, was like, you should retest because I feel like you shouldn't take a test like that when you're in the thick of such chaos and drama. And I mean, that was like one of the hardest things that had happened to me at that point in my life. So I retested, and I was a 3. And every time I've tested since then, I'm a 3. I'm a 3-4 wing. I'm the achiever with the individualist wing.
Okay, I can see that.
But I think the confrontational stuff was definitely a coping mechanism. Because now, you know what? One of my current therapist, who I started working with in 2020, and I still see her. Something she said to me early on, and she's like, I was like telling her this story, and I was like, you know, and he said this, and then I said this, and then it was this, and she's like, do you ever just let them say what they need to say and just let them sit in it? And I was like, hell no. Like, they're not going to, like, it was so important for me to have the last word. It was so important for me to like tell them how I felt, and then she like basically told me to start counting, really. So I started counting to 10 when someone would say something that would trigger me or upset me. And it's so crazy what would happen in that amount of time where I just don't say anything. Mm-hmm. And I started realizing how powerful silence is. Mm-hmm. And now it's to a point where I don't even count anymore. I'm just kind of like, someone says something sideways or crazy, and I'm just kind of like, or you ask them to repeat it. What did you say? And more times than not, they won't say it again.
That's such a good... Okay, so what I'm referring to is asking them to repeat. This is something I've never had, like, someone suggest before. I've never even heard somebody talk about asking them to repeat it as a de-escalation technique.
Yeah.
I'm such a big fan. I love talking about conflict resolution and like navigating conflict. That is one that makes so much sense to me, because they're obviously operating out of a triggered, like, when we're in a heated whatever tussle, right? Just like you were talking about, and I know this wasn't an argument, but when a horrible trauma happened to you, you were testing a completely different personality type as the Enneagram, because you were acting out of a trigger, trauma. We immediately go to...
How can you answer questions about yourself honestly when you're in the thick of, like...
Yes. And when we get heatedly passionate enough to start arguing to the point where, like, all we can see is red or we have to be right, of course we're going to that place. Both sides go to that place. And if you can be the person that is like, okay, wait, I'm going to cool it. Like, it takes two to tango.
Yeah.
So if one of you is able to employ something to start bringing the regulation in place, it can't, the fuel can't keep going. So I love that you just brought that up. This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admission center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help. What do you think, or what do you know about why that is effective, asking them to repeat what they said?
Well, you know, in the heat of an exchange or a moment, you're sparring with words, and then it's like, if someone says something that hurts you, and it also, by the way, this works vice versa. There's been so many times where someone didn't respond to something hateful I said as well. Mm-hmm. And then you're just left to sit in it. But when the last thing said is so hurtful, and you're having to just sit there and resonate with either what you said or allowing someone to sit there and listen to what they said themselves, mm-hmm. and you ask them to repeat it. Excuse me, I'm just trying to understand, what did you just say? A lot of times most people, because I do think most people are kind-hearted and good. You know, I think most people are going to rephrase what they said. I think they're going to put a tad bit more thought, take away the reaction thing, because they sit in that moment of, oh, I just went there. Versus if I go back with this like fiery comment, it gives them a reason to say all the things they're saying. It's like just kind of like taking control of the situation. And like you said, de-escalating it, mm-hmm. because there has to be a certain level of accountability as well.
Sure.
For yourself in these moments. Like, that's the other thing, is like with my therapist, realizing who I was in all of these conflicts and all of these moments. in all of these situations, how was I showing up? Was it kind? No. Was it kind to myself? No. Like, it was just protection mode. I was just in self-preservation mode 24/7.
So I'm going to, through the lens of talking about this in therapy, I want to backtrack just a little to, and compare and contrast. As a kid, coping technique got you into therapy initially, which was the high confrontation. I would say maybe hypervigilance, especially as you moved forward. And again, what's funny or ironic or whatever, you could call this a bunch of things, that confrontation / hypervigilance, there's a fine line between it pushing you into a place where you would have rooms you wouldn't have been in if you hadn't been so pushy, i.e., or souring relationships because you won't let it go, or because, like, you get to a certain point, right? Like, and it's only natural that you've got to, then transition into, but if you're in just hypervigilance mode and fight, like, what did that, I'm interested to know. Okay, so when you started music and got signed to a label, was that here or was it in LA?
It's it was both.
Oh, okay. Start where, so take me to the beginning of music for you, and because I want to know through the lens of how that coping skill for you, did you good and did you bad?
Well, yeah, you're making a really solid point in the sense of, like, what was my Achilles heel was also my superpower. I didn't take no for an answer, literally ever. I went from working at Forever 21 to doing shows in Nashville. The conversation being, like, heavily about, is he gay? Is like, that's not going to work. Like, that kind of being the thing. And then me deciding I'm going to fully lean into my queerness. When I was like 21, started wearing full face makeup. I was performing all over town. My shows were selling out. Like, it was like kind of this like crazy thing. And the next thing you know, I'm getting like offered a publishing deal, which I think was kind of more like a artist development thing. But I'm a songwriter at heart. A lot of my artistry is built on my ability to craft a song. And that's always been the case. So it was easier for the gatekeepers to kind of like put me in that lane. Like, oh, well, you're a songwriter. You're not necessarily an artist. You're a songwriter. And so I started writing all the time, and I was doing that. And I was just so, not that I love writing songs, but more so than being a songwriter, I'm a storyteller. And I love telling my stories. So when you're writing for other artists and doing all this stuff, that part of it for me is just kind of removed. And so I started being sent to LA to write with like pop writers, and I was having this like really crazy, I was writing with like,
so can I ask you, were you writing stories and pulling just from, were you writing your stories yet? You were writing somebody else's stories.
Yeah. I was just I was like playing the game.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like I was trying to play the game, and the people that were kind of like helping me were just, I think, all well-intentioned, but it was just kind of like, and it was working. Like all of a sudden I was in LA writing with like the biggest names in pop music on like my first and second trip to LA. Like it was pretty nuts. And then I was in a joint deal here in Nashville and Los Angeles for my publishing. And there was a publisher there that was kind of like running my calendar that was like kind of believed in me. We were kind of like close, and she just kind of believed in me a little bit more than like the gatekeeper. So she helped me put on a showcase in LA, and that's how I got my first deal. My first record deal is I had that showcase.
Oh, wow.
And I was signed like I was offered a deal a couple days later. And then it was like my whole team in Nashville was like trying to figure out, like they were having to play catch up, and then it was crazy and chaotic. And that was the theme of my career up until 2021. I will just say crazy and chaotic, everything. It was people trying to make me, as the word that would always come up, palatable. And so there was a lot of trauma around that. You know, my
that phrase was literally used to that was said to you.
Honey, that's the nicest thing that was said to me. It was a tough, I got chewed up and spit out when I lived in LA. It was a very tough thing. I was achieving and having all of this success with a top 40 hit, a international viral hit with two huge superstars. I was on an arena tour. All of these things were happening. I was on The Tonight Show. I was on Dancing with the Stars. All of this stuff was happening, and I was the least happiest I'd ever been. Mm-hmm. And you have to start wondering, like, is any of this worth it? Like, why am I so unhappy? Mm-hmm. And I realized at this point I was like in LA pretty much 24/7. I still had my little apartment on Allison over by the fairgrounds here in Nashville. And I just wasn't happy. And I came back for Thanksgiving to spend Thanksgiving with my community here. And I never went back to LA. I just never went back. And
so can I ask you before we move into the moving back to Nashville section, because it's so like knowing you, seeing you, knowing you, hearing you, I like, other than you telling me about the old version of you being, you know, highly confrontational, can you share a little bit about, like, because I'm trying to conceive what does palatable mean in LA?
Let's not forget. I was wearing full face. This is 2015. Okay. I was wearing full face makeup. I was pretty androgynous. I wasn't sitting here wearing a camo hat and a denim. You know what I mean? Like it was a lot different. Like I was a lot different. And you know, I say all that, and I also think about the accountability of I was also the wildest version of myself I'd ever been. Do you know what I mean? I was addicted to diet pills. I was like chasing all the wrong things. I was surrounded by all the wrong people, basically. There's people out in LA in that time of my life that I absolutely adore and I absolutely love. But as far as like someone looking out for my best interest and helping guide me, that was not there. And it was just a really wild time. And I was very different. I could show you a picture right now that you would be like, who is that person? Are you able to search and talk while, like, cause I want to see it. I'll show you. Show me later. Okay. Yeah. I'll show you. It's a very different person. It was, and you can look at that photo and think, but you know, I moved to LA and life visited me pretty much immediately. My roommate passed away, by suicide. And so I was, immediately sent into this world. You know, I thought Nashville was a big city when I moved from Arkansas. And then all of a sudden I'm in LA at 23, moving there by myself, not really knowing anyone. The one person I did know is now gone. And were you, not that this is, sorry, this feels like an irreverent question to ask, but like how, like, were y'all super close? Had you become close? Yeah. Yes. Because I know that, you know, people talk about roommates. Sometimes you're like, no, I seen hi, bye, that kind of thing. No, we hung out. We were really good friends, and it was a really hard. It's still something that's hard for me to kind of understand or try to. It doesn't make sense to me. The whole thing, none of it makes sense, and it's still hard for me. So. And then now you're in this town that's so harsh. It's a harsh town. And you're trying to achieve all of these things. Your dreams are coming true one by one. All this stuff's happening, but none of it's good enough. You know, it's just, it was a really, really confusing, hard time. It was a crash course in careful what you wish for. Right. You know, and because you brought it up, I want to add to this really quick because I think it's important to acknowledge. Not a lot of people know this, but there are multiple psychological studies that support, and I don't know the exact number, but that because I remember the first person like not like distant, but like the first person remotely close to me that died by suicide. And how, I mean, like I could sit here now, it was
I don't know, almost 20 years ago now. But like all those emotions and I've done all my therapy, like all the therapy, but that you can heal all you want.
Yeah.
That stuff always is a reality.
Yeah.
As much healing as we have, like you can go back there. There's something that, connection to a suicide does to our nervous system and our brain that literally permanently changes us forever.
Yes.
And the statistics are something to the tune of, for every person close to you in your inner circle that dies by suicide, your chances or possibility or chances that you might attempt suicide are like multiplied. Even as somebody that may never have struggled with depression, it affects your brain. The trauma there affects your brain and starts causing you to think differently and about different thoughts and life and our mortality than you ever would. But that
makes sense.
It doesn't hardwire. It doesn't rewrite. It doesn't mean that like you're destined to commit suicide, that kind of thing. If it happens, but what it does mean is it's a real trauma that's super serious. That if you don't get help, it's heavy. And if you don't get help, there's real science to show that it could interfere with your will to live potentially. And
that makes a lot of sense to me, because I will say, like, back then it was like I was in a downward spiral. Like everything was, even with like achieving all this stuff, like top 40 hits, The Tonight Show, all these things, these bucket list moments that someone like me had only ever dreamed of. And then all of a sudden, the world's crashing down, and I was just a little bit in a downward spiral. And I think my behavior, my outrageousness back then, I think it probably all started stemming from feeling out of control from that loss, and not getting the help I needed. And definitely I would say that's the first time I really ever felt truly depressed, was through that era. And in my career, that's the Who Is Fancy era. I felt so closeted, so not myself. I felt so out of control. I felt alone. So for me, moving back to Nashville was necessary.
Yeah.
Because I needed community. And even though there's people out in LA that I still love to this day and they're dear to me, it's just logistically hard to be close. And I can see, even still with Nashville growing the way it is, I live on the same street as 6 of my best friends. That's just the truth. And so community is different. And I learned for myself in that transition from leaving LA and the record deals and the management and the success and all of that, leaving it behind. I started working at a bar. Like I was checking IDs at a bar over there. And I started I was having to figure out how to make money in like so many different ways. I got dropped in every direction.
So you got dropped before you came back, or when you made the choice to come back?
Yeah, it was kind of, I came back in November for Thanksgiving, and then I was dropped by that January.
Was that of 19?
That was 2016.
Oh, right. There was like a gap. Right.
So so that was 2016. So from 2016 to, I would say, about 2019, it was a complete, like, those 4 years were just so wild and hard. And I didn't release any music.
Did they give you a reason why they dropped? Do you know, or because do record companies just do it because do they not have to say why? Do they?
I don't know anything about why record companies do anything the way they do it.
Really?
I don't know. I mean,
I was asking just for the purpose of understanding more of your story. I will
say, I think they did it because it wasn't working. And not, I mean, we were having success with like the songs and like it was happening, but I think I was really hard to deal with. I think I was like hard to work with. I wasn't happy. So, I take my accountability in the whole thing. It's not like, looking back now with hindsight, knowing myself now and remembering myself then, I'll take accountability. I was a difficult person. I was hard to work with. I was in a downward spiral. I don't think the people I was working with knew quite how to nurture me.
Can you, okay, so just going to take you on a 1 minute rabbit trail, maybe 30 seconds. But it's so fascinating to me how, in many ways, yes, our unhealthy coping mechanisms, our coping mechanisms take us to unhealthy places. Sometimes, however, though, they carry us through or to a period of healing and protect us until they don't protect us any longer.
Yeah.
And it's not till hindsight 2020 being that we can look back and see. And I'm looking and thinking like, okay, you've just explained to me all these things that made you a difficult person. You self-described. I was difficult, and I think it's what made me so tenacious to get where I got. And it's also why I think ultimately I was dropped.
Yeah.
Can you imagine
it's like
a world?
You know, the things you first start liking about someone.
Oh yeah.
Eventually end up being the things you're like the most eye roll about.
Yes. And so, but the pieces that were unhealed and unhealthy in you that were just screaming so loud. Can you imagine a world where you would have stayed? Like you said, what wasn't working, but certain stuff, the music was working.
Yeah.
The publicity was working. Right? All that was happening. But so can you imagine a world where that pop path is where you kept going down, and all the things you were doing, and the diet pills and whatever else that you were, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like where would that fancy be today, and what level of health, right? Versus the one where your stuff forced people around you to say, no. And you had to make a choice to come home and start really looking at and reflecting on your world, your choices, your music, what you wanted to do, what was good for you. And I know I'm putting words in your mouth right now, but I'm like that. It's so interesting to me how that, like, the compare and contrast there.
Yeah. It's scary for me to think about who I'd be if I stayed in that situation. I was so out of control. And I don't know, you know, it's like, I think about anyone in their 20s. It's a wild time.
Right.
It's a wild time. You're learning so much. I'm like, I meet like 23, 24-year-olds now, and I'm like, oh my God, I was your age and I just moved off to LA. Like, who was I? Like, I was so tenacious and bold, and I did not take no for an answer, and I knew exactly, so I thought, exactly who I was and exactly what I wanted. As you grow, as life happens, priorities change, goals change. I'm grateful for the experience. I'm grateful to have gotten out of that experience.
Yeah.
And I do also just want to say, as wrong as that team was for me, they did everything right by me upon my exit. There's situations where I could still be in those deals. Mm-hmm. And they did really right by me by allowing me to leave and leaving it all behind. Like, you have, as an artist, when you sign deals like that, you have no control. Mm. So the fact that they all allowed me to walk away is actually really kind and positive. It was hard for me to understand then. I'm so grateful for it now. Yeah. Being an independent queer artist here in Nashville, my original dream was to be here in Nashville. I moved to Nashville listening to Little Big Town, Keith Urban, Sarah Evans, Nickel Creek. That was my dream. That's who I wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And, you know, because of my queerness, I felt like that was never going to happen. And it feels so, so, so empowering now to be myself, to be back at my original dream, chasing it and pursuing it and seeing it working.
Yeah.
Seeing things gradually climbing, gradually changing. You know, I've just had one of the busiest years of my entire life. And it's awesome because there's no label. There's a lot of hardworking, believing people behind the scenes helping me connect dots and make the dream, which is now so realized. Mm-hmm. I thought it was realized back then, and it wasn't. And I'm so grateful. Success and the moment you hope for did not find me back then. And I don't know if that's like a bigger picture, if that's the universe or God or whatever looking out for me and my purpose. But I feel so aligned currently in my life in a way that I mean, there was no alignment back then. It was chaos. I mean, it was absolute chaos. And I take a lot of accountability. You know, it's easy to point at labels and managers and blah, 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 blah. And they did me wrong. And it's easy to do that. And I've taken that easy road so many times. I take accountability. I had been going, life visited me when I moved to LA. And I don't know that I had the proper help that I needed emotionally and mentally to really be able to tackle all the things you have to tackle as an artist.
Yeah.
And I really think about these young artists who are like coming out of the gate and having all this success, and, you know, all of a sudden everyone around them is yes, 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 yes. But you know what else I think about is people warn you about yes people, but they don't warn you about no people. And no people are detrimental too, to like a dream.
Yeah.
To like, to really being able to pursue your heart's desire. Fear really plays a part in a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, whether you're seeking to be famous for whatever entertainment art you're in, or a regular, I mean, yes.
Yeah, fear creates words like palatable. And I just am like, I feel so lucky because you said something earlier, hindsight's 2020. And it's funny because I got hit by that tornado in 2020. And the rearview mirror shows me all of the stuff behind me, and it's so crazy and it's so wild, but I was so prepared for that tornado. I've had so many.
When you came back to Nashville, you stopped music at that point?
Basically.
Okay. And
yeah, I hadn't released, when my debut album Southern Curiosity came out in 2021, I had not released music since 2016.
Can I ask, what did you do during those 4 years?
I'll tell you what I did. I partied. Heavily.
Yeah.
I traveled. I partied. I got back to living my life, and there was some highs and lows. I got back to being with my friends, my community. I got back to myself. And so when it came time to start, when I got a new publishing deal, my friend Natalie was working at a publishing company, and her boss Steve signed me. And, you know, they said, what is it you want? And I said, I want to make an album. I've never been able to make a full length album. And that's what I want to do. And he's like, they were like, what do you need from us? And I basically said time, space, and money. And they gave it to me.
And was this right before the tornado hit? Okay.
So this was in 2018. I spent all of 2018 and 2019 making my album, writing. I traveled to London and spent 3 months there writing and living and experiencing, and came back to Nashville. We recorded the album here with two of my dear friends who I've known forever, John and Topher. They produced the album. The whole album is a love letter to community. It's about being queer and being from the South, two things that have presented themselves as hurdles to me in my career. My queerness has been a hurdle from day one. When I was in LA, being Southern and kind of having an inspired thing in my music that is like so obviously inspired by the South. That was always kind of a hurdle. And I'm just so done apologizing for being anything other than exactly who I am.
Yeah.
Having a team of people around me for the first time that were like, we're in. We see it. We want to help make this happen. We start making the album. It started as like a 4-song EP. Next thing I know, it's an 8-song album. Next thing I know, we've recorded 19 songs in the studio, and it's like all of my best friends are there. No one that worked on that record, I had known all those people like almost a decade at that point. Everyone's whose thumbprint is on that album somewhere, or fingerprint. I don't know why I said thumbprint.
Can be one of them.
It's a thumb. All the fingerprints on Southern Curiosity are from people who have known me the majority of my adult life. And so it was so special to do that with my community. And I think you can hear it from top to bottom. Mm-hmm. You can hear the love and the closeness. And for me, that is something I will never sacrifice ever, 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 ever again, is my community. Because it's that important. Mm-hmm. I'm nothing without them. And it's not, I was saying this at the beginning of this interview, I get emotional. It's not about the careers. It's not about the success of people or the individuals or what we're all doing. It's the closeness and it's the knowingness. Being known is so important to me. And I know I have that. And when
you say being known, I want to clarify because I know what you mean.
Yeah.
You're not talking about publicity.
No.
What are you
talking about? I'm talking about heart. You know, it's so, when you know that someone just knows you, being seen, it's the meme that reminds someone of you and they send it. Mm-hmm. It's the phone call you get when someone just knows you're having a bad day.
Yeah.
It's the relationship ending and your community really being there. It's so special. And it's like, I'm just so grateful for all of these experiences. You know, my roof was ripped off my house. My friends were there, you know, like almost instantly.
Wow.
So it's just kind of like the reminder that like...
Fancy, were you in the house when it happened?
Oh, yeah. I've been in all the houses when they went. You know what I mean? It's like, but I was saying, like, I was so prepared for that tornado because my whole adult life, my whole childhood was little tornadoes. Mm. And like coming out of that unscathed and coming out of that with my eyes wide open to what matters is so special. And I feel so grateful. Yeah, it's like,
it tells me that you are, because there's two steps to, I believe, before you start, like you talk about really being seen, being known, living authentically, right? You can't do that though until you get to a place where you find your own identity, understand, and then love yourself for what that is.
I know that's right.
And so from how you articulated, I'm gathering that wasn't the state that you were in LA, right? So what was it that can you put your thumb on what it was that enabled you to do that leading up to the tornado? Because I know you got into therapy at the tornado and started doing some digging in that trauma, but you know, already you were talking about how you had you had people that knew your heart and saw who you were, which means you knew who you were at that point.
I think other people can see and know you and know your potential and know your heart before you do. I think I really arrived to who I currently am because I think that's ever changing, right? I think we're always probably constantly arriving at the newest version of ourselves if we're growing and learning.
Yes.
And doing all of that correctly, or trying to at least. I know for myself, I think 2022 was a big year for me in learning about myself. And it was letting go of old patterns. And in therapy, I joke with my therapist, shout out to Langerica, I love you. You've changed my life.
Shut up. Love her.
Oh, you know Langerica. She's my therapist. And she's incredible. Yeah, she's life-changing. And she's life-giving.
She is.
Like, time with her has truly changed me. And I'm just so grateful. It's something I will never not do. Like, talking to my therapist about all of it is just so important. And we joke about this because, you know, the tornado is why I got put in this therapy program. And I met her after meeting a lot of different therapists, and we just kind of, I felt like I was talking to a friend,
right?
And not like someone who's like, tell me more. Or like, you know, it's like where I just kind of feel like, I need to feel like I'm like chatting
Yes.
Because I'm very
No, I was just making a joke in my head. You felt like you were talking to the Patrick now versus the Patrick you met when you walked in the studio this morning.
Yes, exactly. No, exactly that. And we joke because I was there for the tornado, and we talked about that tornado all of 5 seconds before it was just like off to the races. And it was like my second or third session with her where I just had this crazy epiphany about patterns in relationships, and that were like major conflicts for me. And when I got to the root of that pattern, it changed me.
What's the pattern?
Being really, it was about men and the kind of men I would pursue. And it's about extreme, codependent, emotional closeness without physicality. And it created a lot of tension in my life. And, it made me feel really unworthy, and it made me feel really unseen and uncared for. And, you know, in the South, there's a lot of people not living their authentic self. And so when you're showing up and it's like, you know, maybe I haven't in those moments not arrived to like self-realization. I was being authentically like, I'm openly gay. I'm this, I'm that, you know, this is who I am. Yeah. And, you know, that's attractive to people, but then it's like, they want to be close to it, but it's a whole thing. But
I'm so glad. Thank you for opening up about that piece.
Yeah.
Because I want to say, I think that you hit a button for so many people. And the reason why I think this is applicable, gay, straight, whatever, is how many of us have, and not to say that like, oh, you're just like everyone else, but I think to some level, the human experience being in relationships, many of us can relate. I can in a huge way. How many of us haven't at some point shrunk ourselves? If you struggle with codependency, you know what I'm talking about, to fit what you feel like you want because you can't see any other way of working. Yeah. And then ultimately it catches up, whether you're talking about a friendship or a romantic relationship. Yeah, it's real. And I got to the root of why I was chasing these situationships. Yeah. Is what I would call them. Was the root the pattern, or was it something underneath that? The root was like the original thing. And so I was searching for all of this validation, and I was trying to like change the outcome of that original thing with all these different people. And when I realized that that's what I was doing, and it was something I was creating in my own, when I realized it was my doing, I realized I'd been blaming so many people for so much, when really I needed to just find that root. And once I saw that, it changed everything. It changed everything. The way I show up in relationships, the way I show up for myself, the way I show up in my music, the way I show up in my friendships. It's all the way I show up for my family. It's all so different. It's really different. I'm different. Well, back to what we were just saying, if you feel like it's important to shrink parts of yourself, right? In one of the most, I would say that romantically is probably one of the most important, if not the most important, human relationship that we have in life. People might argue with that, but I'm just going to go ahead and say that. All right. So like, if that's the case, then it's going to trickle down waterfall, and that's going to be the case in all of them. So of course you're not going to be having authenticity, full authenticity in your friendships. You're not going to be having full authenticity in the art that you're producing. Yeah. Because you're not being real with yourself. No. And being able to achieve that and seek that and know that, because ultimately what you're saying is you're able to get to a place where I'm like, no, wait, at all costs, I need to love what the end product of fancy. Like, I need to love the fancy here right now. I need you to love the fancy that's here right now. And you know what is so crazy is, as this was happening, I was telling Langerica, my therapist, I was like, I can't tell you how different life feels like after discovering that root problem. And me and my friend Natalie were at the Green Hills Mall, and this was still kind of like pandemic-ish, so everyone had their like mask on. And we were there, and I was like, Natalie, are you
I was like, I feel like I'm going crazy. And she's like, why? And I was like, because I literally, it's like I could see for the first time. I thought everyone was so beautiful. Everyone. I was like, everyone's gorgeous. It's this weird thing. Everyone's beautiful. I can literally see attractiveness in anyone. Like, it's this crazy thing. And so I was telling my therapist about that. I was like, I'm having this like phenomenon where I just find everyone attractive, and I don't know, it's not like a sexual thing. Mm-hmm. It's just, I'm seeing beauty everywhere I look. And she just smiled and she goes, she said, I feel like you're seeing beauty within yourself for the first time. She's like, I think that the judgment you have always held for yourself is lifting. And when you don't have judgment for yourself, it's really hard to have judgment for other people. Yeah. And listen, I slip in and out of that.
Sure.
Now, I'm human. But that ecstasy that I felt after the first couple months of therapy, and I'm literally at the Green Hills Mall, like, my friend was like, are you on drugs? Like, what is happening? I was like, I think I might be, because everyone is beautiful and I don't know what to do about it. It's making me cry. I was literally sobbing. And it's like, yeah, I just feel having someone to talk to that's just like,
yes. Okay. So what you're getting at, I'm going to put this in my own words. So forgive me if this isn't what you're saying, but I find this to be so true, that when you've healed your trauma, and again, the trauma is always there. It's always going to continue to pop back up. You can always get re-triggered. Totally. But when you've done the work to work on yourself, and you get to a place where you find who you are in this moment, and you love who you are in this moment, and I'll pull all the other stuff away, it makes it possible for you to find the good in, I think, everybody. I think there's some good in everybody. And
I think that's 100% correct.
When we're unhealed, when we're living in our triggered response, react self, we're going to so easily find the bad, whatever's off, whatever's, I mean, we're going to be able to tell you the quickest thing about why it's their fault, whatever just happened, or they're the reason this room has such bad energy, or whatever.
Yeah. Well, when I think about that first breakthrough I had in therapy about that root problem and the accountability I had to then sit with of, oh my gosh, all of these other situations are things I created.
Yeah.
It really, it really makes you have to take accountability all the time, because you're only seeing things from your perspective. Your experience is your own, and
right.
Everyone else's experience is their own, and we're not in charge of anyone else. We're only in charge of ourselves. We're only experiencing what we're experiencing, and that can kind of freak me out sometimes.
Yeah.
Because we can all be sitting in the same room experiencing the same thing, and everyone's takeaway is wildly different. Yeah. The only thing you're responsible for is your own takeaway, your own self.
Yeah.
And protecting yourself and being accountable to how you're showing up for yourself. And I'm finding, like, the more I show up for myself, the more I do hard things for me, the more I try to learn about different situations. I just went through a breakup, and as hard as that was, it's been the biggest teacher. It's been the biggest gift. And I don't mean that in the sense of like not having that relationship as a gift. That's not it. The knowledge that I was able to mine out of the tragedy of heartbreak about myself is forever going to change. It's like changed me again. And it's like I'm learning that as I go through life and these tornadoes find us, the roommate passing away, the losing your deals, the actual tornado losing everything in that, relationships ending, there's pain in all of it. Mm-hmm. You can't avoid it. There's no way out. And what I'm learning is if you allow those things to sit with you and to be your teacher, there is ways where you come out of these things, maybe not better, but you come out different. And allowing yourself to sit with whatever emotions. I used to be someone that ran from all of my feelings. Mm-hmm. I didn't want you to think I was weak. I didn't want anyone to think I was weak. You know what I mean? It's like, so I'm fine. That was my go-to. I'm fine. Let's just keep trucking through. And I'm learning now that, like, I've cried in this podcast. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, I cry at almost every single show I have now, because if I start talking about certain things, good or bad, I have feelings, and I'm not going to hide those anymore. I'm 33 years old, and I'm at a point where I'm like, I don't care who knows what I'm feeling when I'm feeling it. This is who I am. This is what I'm experiencing. This is my experience. And I have so much gratitude for all of these life moments that have felt so heavy before, because when I look back and see them as teachers and think of the person I was through each moment and how stronger I've become and how aligned life feels in this current moment, mm-hmm. I just feel like I would not be who I am right now without all of those.
Absolutely.
Those things.
There's so many of the wisest thinkers and people you would Google great quotes about, right? Have said this in one form of another, that, you know, when we achieve this specific place of healing and personal evolution, where when we start to experience unpleasantness, pain, tragedy, and we very quickly go to this hurts, this is awful, and what lesson, how, like, where is the lesson in this?
Yeah.
Where is the part that is supposed to go with me from this on how I can heal, be a better person, be more sympathetic, empathetic, whatever. I mean, it literally, you can think of any tragedy and there's always something. Yeah. And some of it's learning about, like, what we're doing wrong. Some of it's purely just nothing we did wrong. And it's, now I have the ability to be a lending ear, empathetic, tell my story of how much this hurt for someone else. But always there's a lesson of what we can take forward. We just have to be able to.
You have to find it. And it's like, for me, like, the most recent turbulent thing was a breakup. And it was like my first relationship, my first serious relationship, the uncoupling, someone's moving out, life changing.
Yeah.
And I had so much, like, more so than any of these other situations I've talked about, I had so much, my nervous system was just, like, shot. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I was losing weight. I was like in a really tense space. Mm-hmm. But my friend reminded me that I was kind of doing that thing where it's like, I was just trying to coast. Mm-hmm. I'm fine. I'm actually fine. And then, I had a friend that was just kind of like, it's okay if you're not, it's okay to not be okay. And the second I was given that permission, not that I needed permission, but I didn't know I needed it.
You got reminded.
I lost it. I literally lost it. And I literally kept losing it for days and days and months since. And it's like, and now when I think about that time, and it was just in April, but it's like, even just looking back now, I'm like, wow, it's a gift to be able to experience life. Yeah. It's a gift. That relationship taught me so much. My capacity to love someone, but more importantly, my capacity to allow myself to be loved has always been hard for me. Mm. And I think a lot of queer people might relate to that. Mm-hmm. That thought has been really hard. And I feel so grateful because, I've been on tour after that, and I did this tour in a really hard way. I was just out on the road by myself, slinging my own merch, accompanying myself, driving myself. I drove over 14,000 miles in less than 2 months. And that was really difficult and really hard, but I called it my Eat, Pray, Love tour because I was praying and I was loving, and I ate. You know what I mean? And it just like, when you realize you can like show up for yourself, and I was like meeting all these different people on the road, and like, I'm like, you start feeling yourself thriving again. You start feeling yourself, I feel so awake to myself. I feel so awake to my potential. I feel so awake to my purpose. I feel all of these different things. And just in April, I felt probably the worst I had felt in a long time. And then here we are. Is it July?
Yeah.
It's July. And I'm like, I'm making my new album. I'm in the studio making my new album. I'm preparing to go out on the road again. It's like, I'm dating again. I'm doing all these different things. And it's not just like the list of things that make you feel good. It's the way you feel yourself showing up in those moments.
Well, you're showing up in your life again. And I think that you hit the nail on the head when you said earlier, life is going to life, and lifed really hard multiple times. But you started to work on yourself. You found your modes of healing and modes of coping healthfully. And so when lifed again in a really hard way this past April, the boomerang, you came back, so like you were reaching out for the things that were good for you, that were bringing you back to center. And center might look so different. It does look different for you now. Like you said earlier, there's a new version of who I truly am. We're constantly evolving and finding what that new version is. Yeah. But it's not inauthentic. You came back to yourself. And I think that's a testament to the work that you've done. And it's so beautiful because it's freedom.
Yep. It is.
It's true freedom.
Yeah.
Fancy. I feel like, God, this could be, I could do this for 8 hours with you.
Do we need a part 2?
I mean, and 3 and 4. I don't.
Let's go.
Oh my God. Okay, but we've reached the end of our episode, but I wanna ask you, no pressure here, but I always feel like this is one of my favorite and most important questions that I like to ask my guests, because as every story is so unique and different. For that person or people who have identified with, which I think are probably a lot listening or watching, with your story, what word of encouragement would you like to leave for them? Those people that feel that, they tuned in feeling like their situation, they just didn't see hope or light at the end of the tunnel, what to do next.
Yeah. For me, the most life-giving thing is community. And something I'm never, ever, ever doing again, and this is what I would encourage anyone, is to stop sitting at tables where you have to explain yourself in any direction. My life has changed tenfold when I only sat at the table where I knew I was seen, where I knew I was heard, where my voice mattered, where there wasn't, I've had to sit at tables and explain myself in my career, in my friendships, in relationships, and life just feels sweeter and way more aligned when you're sitting at tables where people make space for you. And I think it's about community and finding the community of people that are life-giving, and that I'm not saying are yes people, but they're not no people either.
Right.
They're let's figure it out people. And that's the most important kind of person to be around in any direction, your career, a relationship, friendships. I just no longer feel the need to explain myself. I've had to do too much of that. And I know a lot of people have to do too much of that. And we got to find those people that make us feel seen, heard, and cared for. And it's more important than I could ever have imagined, even just like 2 years ago.
1,000%.
That community and feeling like people show up for you the way you show up for them. It's just, there's nothing better.
Words to live by. That was really good. Most of the time people get stumped and they're like, just say yes to taking care and loving yourself, whatever. I didn't tell Fancy, y'all, that I was going to ask him that at the end of the episode. That was really good and so true. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks for having
sharing
me.
your heart, all of it.
No problem.
I cherish this the time with you.
Likewise. This is awesome.
Yes, sir.
Like a free therapy session.
Oh, that's such an honor. So, I want to remind each and every one of you that it's never too late to start loving yourself. And you're always only one decision away from a completely different life. That's a wrap.
I know that's right.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admission center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.